Hey guys, welcome to the MGF Podcast. This is episode 17 of the show with a temporary name where we talk movies, shows, games, Lego, and whatever else. Joining me as always is Tate.
What's up, guys? I hope you guys are doing good. Ross actually took an action figure out of the packaging for once in his life. Good job, Ross. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, like just before we started up here, I opened up the Marvel Legends Mysterio. And normally when I open action figures, I'm just like, I can just put this back in the package and just, rehang it to the wall and be fine once I'm done looking at it or whatever. Or in like Captain Marvel's case, I still have that figure. I've had her out of the packaging for months to use for reference. But yeah, man, I pulled Mysterio out. He's a really cool figure. This is totally a side tangent to start on, but I've got a little Mysterio action figure just like hanging out next to my laptop with me for the show. Um,
Man, I'm
but
proud of
yeah,
you,
so
Ross. I'm proud of you. You're actually playing with your
thanks,
toys,
dude.
dude.
Yeah, instead of giving, I keep about 95% of my figures in the packaging display just so I can like
98%.
I mean, dude, not only do they retain their value and I can sleep at night knowing that they are, gaining value by staying in there and, I can sell them for more later, like a year or two down the road. Um, but it's like also for moving purposes, it's way easier because you're sliding them already protected into boxes and it's very efficient that way. Um, but anyway, off
I
the
got you
topic of
started.
action figures, this is our Spider-Man Far From Home podcast. So we're going to be doing no spoilers and spoilers for the entire duration of the show. But I have already seen Spider-Man Far From Home twice. I saw it Tuesday night and then Wednesday night as well, which was obviously kind of different because I think I told you like I forgot Spider-Man. Like it was Monday, and then I was thinking, oh, Spider-Man's in a couple days, still got a couple days, before we go see that. And I was like, oh wait, no, that's tomorrow because
No, that's not what happened. I'll tell you what happened.
the tickets went up like 2 months ahead of time, man, like way far back.
Ross and I were playing Star Wars Battlefront, and I was like, dude, are you excited for Spider-Man tomorrow? And he just said, what?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. You got it. Oh man,
But um,
yeah,
but yeah, it was because of Fourth of July, but it's still kind of weird in terms of like Sony marketing. Like I know
it
personally, I
worked though.
went.
I mean, have you been seeing the box office numbers? They're already up to like 580 million or something crazy. It's gonna crack a billion.
Yeah, it definitely will. But I'll tell you, and my theater, you know, my theater's weird, right? My theater's really weird.
Yeah.
But dude, I was there at 2 p.m. matinee, and there were maybe you know 15 people in like a 70-person theater, 80-person theater.
Wait, how many people?
15.
Wow.
Like I was
That's
expecting like the seats filled with kids
yeah.
because there wasn't a preview showing like what they always do with movies. There wasn't one on like Monday or anything like that because like usually they do Thursday night.
Oh yeah, it was weird, man. Sony is so weird with distribution because like
Yeah.
the first showings for Far From Home were Monday at midnight
Right. Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
lot of
Exactly.
people,
They
including
didn't.
my
So technically, it was all on Tuesday. They didn't do like the Monday
yeah,
9 o'clock pre-show or 7 o'clock pre-show.
yeah. And so it was very odd distribution for how they did this because obviously movies release Thursdays right before the weekend, every time most of the time. But it's like yeah, dude, Sony, that's the one thing. Obviously, Marvel Studios, Disney, and Sony sharing Spider-Man to do this. Sony gets to do all the distribution, and it's night and day. I mean, Marvel gets really bad, sure. Like Disney's marketing team for Marvel Studios, they eventually get really out of hand with TV spots, and things slowly get out of control,
Yeah, but at least they didn't post
especially the
freaking
earlier
Far From
movies.
Home trailer before Endgame. I mean, that was ridiculous. When the Far From Home trailer came out
Oh, that
in
was bad, man.
Endgame,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Sony is just not good with distribution, and then yeah, they were playing the Far From Home trailer before screenings of Endgame.
With
I
the
mean,
spoiler, might I add, with the spoilers in the trailer.
yeah, I mean, it's Sony is just in terms of marketing, they're not Disney. um, but yeah, man. So Spider-Man: Homecoming for me, I loved. I mean, I like that movie for me was the perfect balance of the humor, the charm with Spider-Man, and the emotional weight that comes with his story. And it was just the perfect balance between those two things: the emotional, serious moments, the humor, the charm. The way it was just all there, and nothing that was more intrusive than the other. And I was hoping that Spider-Man: Far From Home was going to be the same. But look, man, I mean, watching the movie, I mean, I'll be honest, I was in a pretty bad mood that day when I saw it, but
Oh, he was.
then I went in the second day and I still felt the same way. And I want to preface this. I want to make sure that nobody comes away from this podcast thinking that either of us hated the movie.
I actually
that either of us
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it much more than Ross.
So just to preface our entire podcast, those of you guys who are hanging out with us today, Super Chris Productions, Z-Bricks, Diesel, Lego Tube, what's up, guys? We really enjoyed Spider-Man Far From Home. It is a fun movie.
Enjoyable is a great word for this movie because it's not much more than that in my opinion, but it is very enjoyable, very fun.
Yeah, I would recommend it to anybody. It is a fun watch. It is a great time. It's just not amazing. It's not spectacular.
It's not the next Winter Soldier or Homecoming. I
would go as far as to say it's almost not a Spider-Man movie because it misses out on so much of what makes Spider-Man so great.
In your opinion and in your experience, yes. We do see these kind of situations in Spider-Man comics, but not when he's a kid. You know what I mean?
Right. And Tate and I have had this conversation a lot.
Yeah, we'll go into this in spoilers, but there are a lot of things that this movie kind of did way too soon. I mean, this was a very premature Spider-Man story. I mean, he's a kid, and he's doing things that comic Spider-Man did when he was in his 20s.
Yeah, and that's the problem with him going to Titan, being involved in the greatest battle of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in Endgame. A lot of the major events you expect to come with Spider-Man's story, like the order of events you would expect is like high school, gets bitten by the spider, becomes Spider-Man, college, eventually meets the Avengers, starts becoming an adult, then he starts going to alien planets, then Iron Man dies, then all those big major things happen. As he grows up. Instead, Marvel's doing it backwards, and that's obviously because they needed to get Spider-Man in the cinematic universe in 2016, and no later than that, and they wanted to just get started on him. But it's like, and I'm glad, man. I'm not necessarily arguing with how they're doing it.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like I should because in the comic books we don't have the Spider-Man Iron Man connection. That's just not a thing. That's something that's very new. That's very new in the MCU. But we do have story beats that mirror it, right? We do have mentors that he has, right? Like, the name escapes me right now, but the Lizard, Dr. Connors, the Lizard, that's a big thing in the comic books in some iterations, right? You have Dr.
Connors, really cool, man.
Dr. Octavius in some aspects, right? Those are the mentor characters that lead Peter through his teenage years. Those people become villains when he's in college. And then by the time he's an adult, they start dying, right? And he has to start dealing with with grieving these people's deaths, right? And I wish we would have gotten at least 3 Spider-Man movies before Endgame. So we would still have that Spider-Man dynamic, right?
Right, man, because, I mean, and we talked about this a lot, it's like, it's the idea of Spider-Man having seen it all. He fought the Mad Titan with the Infinity Stones and fought against the greatest powers the universe has to throw at the Avengers. And now he's going to Venice and just hanging out 8 months later after Endgame, jokes out of what happened. Yeah. It's like, and that to me is the biggest problem with Spider-Man Far From Home, or is the excessive use of the jokes. But I mean, listen, man, again, to make it very clear, we both really enjoyed the movie. It is fun, and there are things that I really loved. I mean, Tom Holland, of course, is perfect the whole way through. I mean, just completely consistent as the character, making the absolute most with what he's given. Jake Gyllenhaal, maybe a little over the top at times, but was really great as Mysterio. Easily has, some of the best sequences. Yeah, I mean, Sam Jackson as Nick Fury was good. It was nice to have Kobe Smulders back finally. There were good moments in there, of course, for Aunt May as well. And this was one of Happy Hogan's best. This might be Happy Hogan's best movie in the MCU.
Yeah, that's
honestly. Fair. His appearance in Endgame was powerful because of what had just happened.
Right.
But as far as his contribution to the story, this is Jon Favreau's best like appearance as Happy Hogan, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, especially after Tony dies, and you know what he kind of says he's becoming, you know, the parental figure for Peter at this point. So I mean, yeah, the cast is really great. Zendaya does a really great job with what she's given as well.
I disagree, but
I mean,
that's just me.
Again, I you know, strong emphasis on with what she's given.
Right.
I don't agree with what she was given, but as far as what she could do with what she was given for the character,
yeah,
I don't know.
She's a good actress. Is pretty much what Ross is saying right now.
Right.
Yeah, she's a good actress.
Yeah, to simplify, you know, I mean, there seriously the some of the sequences with Mysterio are just phenomenal, and a lot of the sequences with Spidey, and you know, I mean, some of them are just very satisfying. A lot of the humor is okay, especially the humor with the teacher. I forget his name, Mr. Whatever. You know, I thought he was funny. And the story isn't half bad. It's not great.
The story is definitely serviceable, and it gives us a lot of really good Spider-Man moments, and that's what a Spider-Man movie should do. So I think it's fine.
Yeah. So a big problem that another big problem, this isn't spoilers, with Spider-Man Far From Home, is the fact that he's far from home. And it's like, again, you know, we talked about this, it's like, again, because they're kind of going backwards, he's spending, you know, I mean, Civil War, he's in an airport in Germany. Homecoming, he's in the suburbs of New York. He's not actually in NYC or Manhattan or Queens, really, for most of the time. For Infinity War, he's in New York briefly, which was really awesome. And then shot up to space on the Flying Donut, and then he's on Titan for the rest of the movie. Endgame, he's, you know, upstate New York, battlefield, doesn't even look like New York. Spider-Man has been out of his element for almost his entire time being in the MCU already.
He spent more time out of his element than, you know, in Brooklyn. You know,
and granted, I think it's great that they're, you know, that they're making it very clear that they are trying to do the opposite of what has been done with the Raimi trilogy and the Andrew Garfield movies, to really make sure audiences disconnect from those iterations of the characters and completely reconnect with Tom Holland's Spider-Man in a totally new way, so that audiences can start to forget about those and really focus on this version of Peter in the MCU. And it's like, but at the same time, this is coming at the cost of him not being in New York. Yeah. You know, we don't even, Uncle Ben's name isn't even mentioned. I mean, we're not even allowed to have Mary Jane as we know her from the source material. We're not.
Ross and I talked about this. They're subverting every expectation that we have, which is kind of harming the Spider-Man mythos.
Right? Yeah, man.
Uncle Ben is the reason why. I mean, Peter Parker's a great kid. That's the whole point of Homecoming, right? He's a really upstanding kid, and the reason he's so upstanding is because of Uncle Ben, and the reason he's a little bit naive and has a really good heart. Like we'll talk about this in spoiler section, because I mean, he has good intentions through the whole movie. It's a Spider-Man movie, but the reason he has such good intentions in every situation is because of Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben instilled these optimistic thoughts within Peter, and for some reason, they're not addressing that at all.
It's just Uncle Ben is such a, you know, it's like, of course you don't need to show his death again. You know, people have seen it.
His death. We've seen that for years, but guys.
But mentioning it here and there is fine. They only very indirectly implied what had happened in Homecoming when Peter just says, and everything she's been through, and that's it. That's the only, you know, implication that we've got of Uncle Ben's death in the entire MCU up to this point.
I don't want to see Uncle Ben in the MCU. That's not what I'm saying. But I want Peter to say. I want Peter to say, what would Ben do? Right? Or like, you know, hit us with the freaking cheesy "with great responsibility" line, or "with great power comes great responsibility." Hit us with that line, just one. Like Peter could say, I don't necessarily need
that, but I mean,
like something like, oh, what was Ben saying? What was Ben saying? Something about responsibility.
Or how about he finds a letter from Uncle Ben or something? You know, just
something, a small thing.
I mean, I'm sorry, man, but we're railing about Uncle Ben so much because, again, that character is so foundational for who Peter Parker is, and to just reduce his presence in the MCU after 5 appearances from Tom Holland already to just a briefcase that gets blown up in, I think, I don't even remember what happened to it in the movie, honestly.
Who knows? There's a lot of big moments.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of big set pieces. He loses that briefcase at some point, and then it's like, you know, there's that, and then, you know, I also take issue with the fact that they kind of, Tony has really replaced Uncle Ben, right? And the tragedy that's supposed to fall on Peter is supposed to be Tony now and his death. But it's just so strange because we're at the point now where it seems like Tony Stark has had a bigger impact on Peter's life than Uncle Ben ever did. And so to me, that's really, kind of, that's not, I don't want to say not okay. And I don't want to, be too negative here. Cause again, we really did enjoy the movie. And Tait, by the way, just stepped away for a second. But yeah, man, I think Tony Stark being a parental figure to Peter is fine. But to replace Uncle Ben, I don't think that's the case. There needed to be a balance there. So again, just going further and further with no spoilers here, Peter being out of his element. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of what makes Spider-Man great as far as set pieces go is him swinging through the city, through the streets of New York, the spirit and the energy that's derived from those moments, whether it had been in the Raimi trilogy or Andrew Garfield's movies or Spider-Man PS4. There's nothing that breathes more life into the character of Spider-Man than seeing those swinging sequences, and they're just so absent from Far From Home because he's all over Europe in this movie, and that's having Spider-Man be out of his element really strips away a lot from him because New York is so integral to who he is as well. And so that's the problem is that's another thing. But then listen, man, I did really, when he was in the action set pieces, I mean, the suits looked really cool. The new black and red suit is awesome. The wings that come with it, of course, that he already kind of had in Homecoming, and obviously, and then, I think it was really cool that they kind of opened the movie with the Iron Spider suit, and the stealth suit is really cool as well. The elementals are all really awesome to look at. Mysterio is pretty phenomenal. He looks a little too fake at times. When the opposite is supposed to be true. He's supposed to be very real, right? But it's like, yeah, man, it's just Spider-Man Far From Home, because you are missing New York City, because you have this awkward rendition of Mary Jane that they're trying to push with Zendaya, and you have an Aunt May who's seemingly unconcerned with everything that has happened. It's just very strange. And it's very strange that the whole world has seemingly recovered pretty easily from the snap. That is a theme that is kind of present. You would think after half of the universe's population, trillions of people, go without their loved ones, there would be some kind of visible change in the world. Even 8 months later, the way people talk, the way people interact with each other. But everything seems to be rebuilt and everything is just kind of moving along, business as usual, which is kind of strange, man. And, no spoilers there. I think it's made pretty clear in the trailers. And I was hoping for something different actually seeing the movie, but it's really, the vibes that you get in the trailers are pretty consistent throughout the actual movie too. But yeah, man. And so as far as the, the Endgame tie-ins go, I won't spoil too much more, but they are definitely a little too few and far between. And honestly, aside from the things I've already said, Spider-Man Far From Home, it's a really good movie. Like I said, it's really fun, really enjoyable. I've already said that like 4 times, and Tait agrees. But it's just, the big problem with Far From Home is, even though we've got Tom Holland here giving his best performance, we've got Jake Gyllenhaal doing really great as Mysterio, and a really awesome cast, the story isn't that great. It was written by the guys who did Ant-Man and the Wasp, and Ant-Man and the Wasp sucked. And you can very clearly see that lack of imagination in Far From Home as well. And, I'm sure they're great people who wrote Spider-Man Far From Home, but there's just a clear lack of potential in terms of what is being executed upon with Far From Home. You walk out of this movie and you just think, with a 2 hours and 2 hours 15 minutes, however long the movie is, 2 hours 10 minutes, whatever, all they could do with a Spider-Man sequel that follows up Avengers Endgame, and how little Spider-Man Far From Home actually accomplishes, it's a little bit of a shame. And and this is not like an attack on how you might feel about the movie, guys. If you enjoyed Spider-Man Far From Home more than we did, that is awesome. I always say that to anybody who likes movies more than me. And I think Tate would agree. It's like that's a better movie that you got to see that people who didn't enjoy it as much did not. And so again, I had a fun time. It's an enjoyable watch. But there's just so much more they could have done, I feel like, and they just don't. And the jokes, like I said, kind of in the beginning of the show, Spider-Man Homecoming had a much better balance of inserting clever jokes where they worked, while also really taking time to make you feel the weight and consequences of the more serious moments with Vulture, with Peter trying to be his best under the wing of Iron Man and trying to live up to a standard that he may not really be ready for. But there's no evolution for his character beyond Endgame. And if you ask me, by the end of Spider-Man Far From Home, there certainly isn't much of one. There isn't a clear message really in Far From Home, which I thought was kind of strange. And it's just like, when you're following up Spider-Man Far From Home, or I'm sorry, Spider-Man Into that animated film that just could not have been more perfect, it's hard to regress to a live action MCU Spider-Man movie that is just so much more simple, so much more shallow as a narrative, and just kind of it's hard because the movie kind of left me feeling a little empty by the end, which is weird. It's there's something about watching the original Sam Raimi movies, and I mean honestly, especially even the Amazing Spider-Man movies, that kind of just leaves you a little bit more satisfied by the end of it. Whereas you're kind of left feeling a little bit hollow by the end of Far From Home. Again, because of the lack of potential for what we really could be doing here now with Tom Holland. The definitive actor to play Spider-Man is here in the MCU, and they're not making the most of these opportunities with the movies while he's here. And granted, Tom Holland is here to stick around, but it's like, there's just so much more they could have done. And there isn't a whole lot more I can cover without going into spoilers. But Tate has specifically requested that I don't go into spoilers until he gets back. So I guess to just kind of chat with you guys a little bit, Lego P3, yeah, Peter really hasn't grown since Homecoming. Yeah, that's a pretty fair statement, unfortunately. I mean, it's just that's a, like I was saying, that's a big thing that's very much missing from Far From Home. If you're going into this movie expecting the consequences of Endgame to be felt, to really matter, and to really deeply affect the characters, that doesn't happen in this movie. I mean, there are moments where it's brought up, right? You saw it in the trailers. There are moments where Peter looks around and he sees Tony's face all over the place. The world knows what, that Iron Man sacrificed himself to save the universe. It got around. And you saw the moments in the trailers when he's with Happy tearing up. You have those moments, but they're brief and they're short-lived. And the movie also struggles with this idea of who should be the next Iron Man, right? And no spoilers, but it's like they're very inconsistent with the message and that character arc for Peter. So there are a lot of things to really enjoy about Far From Home. Like we said, it's a really fun time, and it might exceed your expectations. I wouldn't say that it exceeded ours. Tate, what do you think?
Oh man, you caught me at a good time, dude. I just got back.
Yeah, I can tell.
There are a lot of, I mean, I already said this earlier, but in terms of exceeding expectations, man, I mean, it does. That's their goal, and it does. But does it need to? But do they need to? Do these big things need to happen? I don't think so. Yeah. Especially for a teenage Peter Parker. Now, I'm kind of combing through chat, and some people are upset with the way that that MJ and Peter were acting towards each other. And I just want to say, I have a 15-year-old brother, all right? And Spider-Man is canonically, what, 15, 16? Around that age?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, dude. I mean...
He's like 16 or 17 now.
Well, let's just say like 15 through 18.
No, he's definitely not 15. He's like 16 at least.
All right, well, 16. Dude...
He was 15 in Civil War.
People jump around 14. From like crushes to crushes so quick. So like I had no problem. Like that was a big criticism. I heard that he just liked MJ for no reason. That's fine, dude. That's what kids do.
Yeah, man.
And just like with Ned and Betty. I mean, they were in and out that quick.
Dude, you want to just cut the spoilers now?
Oh yeah. And then I'm gonna do my trademark. So In closing, my opinions, my non-spoiler opinions, it was good. Not as good as Homecoming. Not as good as Winter Soldier, but definitely worth a watch. I would rate this in the B category of Marvel movies. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, dude. So to finally cut to spoilers, if you have not seen Spider-Man Far From Home, this is your warning. We are going full into pretty much everything that happens in this movie. So if you have not seen Spider-Man Far From Home, this would be the point where you click off. I would love it if you could catch the VOD after you have seen the movie on the channel. It'll be made available there. Otherwise, we'll catch you anybody who hasn't seen Spider-Man Far From Home next week. So
5,
spoilers.
4, 3, 2, and 1. J.K. Simmons is in the movie as J. Jonah Jameson. Oh my God, Ross, that is
cutting straight to the post-credit scenes.
Ross, oh my God, that was incredible, dude. See J. Jonah Jameson back.
Yeah, so that actually got spoiled for me. I knew J.K. Simmons was going to be J. Jonah again before going into the movie, and
that sucks. I had no idea, and I screamed in the middle of the movie theater, and I got chased by a bunch of 40-year-old.
And I knew that Mysterio would quote unquote die, but
which is
I didn't know about the Skrulls, and I didn't know about his identity being outed. But dude, to kind of
start from the beginning, maybe
God, there's so much to cover in spoilers. Well, I guess we might as well just start off with the post-credit scenes now that we're already here. So Tate and I kind of talked about this a little bit, and again, it goes back to the conversation of them kind of going in reverse. Spider-Man, he's going to space, he's leaving New York, he's barely in New York, and he's already on to 5 appearances in the MCU where we haven't had a definitive Spider-Man movie that has him in New York, that has him going up against his most iconic foes, that has him, actively pursuing the relationship with MJ. He's out in Europe. It's just not the same. And so his identity being out is to kind of back into that, because it's like, now how much potential is gone from the MCU's Spider-Man? Now that Spider-Man 3 is going to be fugitive Peter Parker and probably not dressing up as Spidey too much, always on the run. Who the hell knows what's going to happen?
That just sucks. I mean, okay, you know what? I'm going to go on a Tate rant, because you always get your Ross rants, and I'm sick of it. It's Tate rant time. I have been a Spider-Man fan. Spider-Man and Batman, those are the comics I read religiously. All right, and I talk about it all the time, how much I love Spider-Man and Batman. Spider-Man has 3 stages to life in the comic books, 3 stages to his life in the comic books. You have child Peter Parker, you have college Peter Parker, well, child being teenager, but you have teenage Peter Parker, college Peter Parker, and then adult Peter Parker. Right? Those are the 3 stages of Peter Parker. Teenage Peter Parker, there's certain things that need to happen. Uncle Ben needs to die. He needs to gain his powers. He needs to, learn how to harness his powers, and he needs to balance his powers with school. Right? Mm-hmm. College Peter Parker, you add Mary Jane into that. Mary Jane, who I like when she was a childhood friend, but Mary Jane, can be whatever. She could be a worker at the Daily Bugle. She could be whatever.
Well, I think it's good if Mary Jane starts out in high school.
I think it is too, but, doesn't matter as much as I think some people put it on. Like they don't need to be childhood friends, but Mary Jane needs to be introduced. He has to have his, he doesn't need the photography job, but he needs to have, a job to struggle with, a girlfriend to struggle with. He needs to have school struggles, relationship struggles, work struggles, and then Spider-Man struggles, of course. And then adult Peter Parker, when he's an adult, you carry over the relationship issues because he has to do all the Spider-Man stuff. And then you bring in the identity crisis of Spider-Man, Spider-Man losing his powers, Spider-Man going to space, Spider-Man being ousted. Right? And in Civil War, he was young.
It's not to say that Spider-Man's story should be formulaic.
No, but of course not.
Yeah, but at the same time, man, there are just things lost when you go in this order.
Absolutely. I mean, if you reveal Spider-Man's identity too early on, you don't have any of the Low Street Queens villains. And the Low Street Queens villains are the best ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have the continue. You have Rhino, Scorpion, Electro.
Yeah.
Mysterio as well. Mysterio and Vulture and Green Goblin, and more recently you have Negative Man and Kingpin being there. But you have these New York supervillains. And right now, with his identity being out, it's not going to be New York supervillains, man. It's going to be like the world is going after him.
Yeah, man. Right? And so that's the thing is like, to me, it's interesting that they're going this route. It obviously subverts expectations to a pretty great degree, but it's like, but then I think to the future, and let's entertain the idea that they do Green Goblin, that they do all these other iconic villains, maybe they do Venom, whatever we see in the MCU, and those moments, those important moments of Peter making the effort to hide his identity, to protect those he loves, to protect Aunt May, Mary Jane, whoever is in his life at the time. And by hiding his identity, all that's lost. Green Goblin's going to know who he is. J. Jonah Jameson trying to find Peter's identity, trying to figure out who's Spider-Man, get me pictures. It doesn't matter. He knows who Spider-Man is. He's Peter Parker.
So
he's right.
Look back.
All that's gone, man.
Look back at like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, and this is where it's kind of upsetting. Both Octavius and Green Goblin know who Spider-Man is in those movies, right? Octavius figures out who he is. But Green Goblin knows who he is pretty early on in the movie. And he immediately kidnaps Mary Jane. You know, we don't need those very on-the-nose superhero things where, you know, people immediately get targeted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People don't need to be immediately targeted, like in those movies. Give us more so a comics thing. I mean, I really want to see Kraven the Hunter in an MCU film hunting down Spider-Man. And I said last week, no, did I say this last? I don't know when I said this, but I would rather this setting to be Kraven the Hunter, hunting him through these different towns during the field trip. I think that would have been a cooler dynamic. But anyway, that aside,
you know, make a bit more sense for Kraven to have been the villain of this movie.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. But I mean, there's so many things we're missing out on now as Spider-Man fans, and it's just really
and I mean, you know, again, then all of this comes as a consequence of needing to Spider-Man into the MCU as soon as the opportunity with Sony came up in 2014. But you know, it is what it is, and these things are just still worth addressing because there are just things that are iconic to Spider-Man's story that simply cannot happen now in the MCU because of this post-credit scene.
But and also, like, why didn't Fury expose this? Like there were so many things to expose about Mysterio that just wasn't exposed.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's and Tait, you know, because Far From Home dealt with Endgame's consequences so lighthearted, you know, in such a lighthearted way. They were like 8 months later, everything's a joke now. They're all dead and have been dead for 8 months, and we're all good and are done mourning, and the audience isn't, and so it's very awkward for the audience. But it leads me to believe if the story was weak like this in Far From Home, why should we expect this identity ousting in the next movie in Spider-Man 3 to be anything too crazy that they also won't just move on from really quick and gloss over the consequences of and just start, you know, doing whatever. It's just like, that should be a big deal. A lot of the things that have happened to Tom Holland's Spider-Man should be a big deal. Aunt May figuring out his identity should be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, MJ figuring out his identity should be a slightly bigger deal than it is.
They did this fine. I think MJ figuring it was fine in this movie. I really but I mean she's an intellectual person. She's an investigative journalist.
But I think they could have made it a little bit more surprising for Peter. But I don't know. Maybe that's nitpicking there. But I think
that was better than May finding out in the last movie. Personally.
Yeah, man. I it's just they do all these things and they set up all these things and they just haven't gone anywhere with them for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Yeah. But yeah, there was that, and then as far as the Skrulls post-credit scenes go, I really appreciated that.
Opens a lot of doors, man.
It not only does it open a lot of doors, but Nick Fury and Maria Hill were just not acting themselves in this movie.
Yeah, it was subtle. It was really subtle. I didn't really notice until I thought about it. And Ross told me.
Yeah, dude. No, I mean, what kind of started to throw me a little bit was when Nick Fury started. You know, he mentions who he just met 8 months prior in the Battle of Avengers HQ, and then Nick Fury goes and he says, "Don't evoke her name." It's like, he wouldn't say that. You know, yeah. He wouldn't say that to Peter. And then, like, you know, just blatantly, criticizing Peter. This 17-year-old kid and trying to pressure him to do all of this. So, you know,
when Nick Fury would be more so, you know, embracing the fact that he is another superhero. You know, kind of be
man.
He's kind of be sucking Peter off. Like, think about what he did with Steve Rogers. He was super supportive of Steve in the Avengers.
Yeah, man. He would be trying to support Peter and trying to inspire him and tell him what's at stake and, you know, kind of come down to his level.
And then he can start being a dickhead, like in Winter Soldier when he started being a dickhead to Steve.
Yeah, but he was still there to help, and was, he wasn't this background character just there to chastise the lead. And so that's why I'm saying I really appreciated the Skrulls twist, and clearly that was the intention from the beginning, for them to be a little bit off in this movie, because I really at first had a problem with Nick Fury and Agent Hill after everything they've been through in the Avengers, Winter Soldier, pretty much laying the foundations of the MCU with S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything that they did, setting up the Avengers Initiative, to just be reduced to jokes. I was like, this is not okay, and I'm not okay with this. But then I was going to have a real big problem with that. But then by the time but then once they did the post-credit scene, it was revealed that it was Talos the whole time. And I was like, that's awesome. That was cool. That was something lifted straight from the comics, a moment like that. Like, I really appreciated that. So I love the Skrulls twist.
An interesting Reddit thing I saw was what if Talos and his wife were the ones that got snapped at the end of Infinity War in that post-credit scene?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible, because it, of course, brings up the question, how long has Nick Fury been up in space with the Skrulls? Was that even him in Endgame? It'd be a real shame if it wasn't him and he wasn't actually at Stark's funeral.
Oh,
what's going on?
Yeah.
Maybe Nick Fury didn't get snapped away and he was on board ship helping Skrulls in the last 5 years. Who the hell knows? We don't know yet. There are plenty of questions raised with this Skrulls post-credit scene, but it did a huge service to this movie as far as Nick Fury and Maria Hill's inclusions go, because that was going to be real problematic if they didn't have that scene revealing that they were actually Skrulls the whole time. So yeah, that was awesome, man. I love that. And it's exciting because it's kind of like it's a reverse, it's a reverse, it's like a reverse version of Secret Wars, right? Where now we don't know who's a Skrull and who's not. You have to, and now we're gonna be overanalyzing people from here on out.
Man, you know what? I really just hope that that Rhodey's not a Skrull. I don't want Rhodey to be a Skrull, man. Like, that's the one character. Like, let us have that. Let us have Wanda. Anybody else, fair game.
Yeah.
Dude, okay, speaking of side characters, B characters, I know that this isn't Far From Home directly, but this is MCU related. I'm really disappointed that the new Falcon series is going to be a series and not a movie.
Yeah, man, because
so upsetting to me.
I hope it'll be okay, and that when he eventually shows up in the next ensemble, whatever it is, it'll still connect and
Cap's
flow.
Take a leadership role, dude. Even in the comic books, he takes a leadership role.
But yeah, and there was actually a deleted scene where he was Sam Wilson Cap was going to debut in Far From Home in a brief scene, but they cut that.
Speaking of which, with these massive power readings and all of this massive televised thing happening, think about in Infinity War, what happened with Wanda and Vision? They saw the TV report, they saw the news report at the little cafe, and they sprung into action, kind of, until they got attacked. So
yeah, they linked up with the Avengers and were ready for anything.
So where are the Avengers? You know what I mean? Where's
right,
Falcon?
Man.
Where's Bucky?
Where's Wanda? Bucky, where's Falcon? Where's Bucky? Where's Thor? I mean, Thor's off world, but where's Valkyrie?
Yeah.
Where's Valkyrie and the remaining Asgardians? There are questions raised as to why,
or the freaking wizards that are supposed to protect reality.
And I did kind of find it weird that Nick Fury didn't fill Talos in on how to protect the Avengers.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he would have, but obviously that's for Marvel's sake because they can't have the Avengers in every movie.
Doctor Strange should be in this movie.
But I feel like
Doctor Strange should have been.
I'm telling you, with the Skrulls twist, it is like a Matrix moment with Marvel as far as dodging bullets.
Yeah.
Dodging the bullet of why they couldn't contact the Avengers, dodging the bullet of Nick Fury's inclusion in Far From Home being so goofy. The Skrulls twist really did a lot for the movie. It did, man. It was good.
But Doctor Strange is the guardian of Earth. Right.
So he would have shown up by himself, right?
Why wouldn't he investigate anything?
He would have teleported straight there and been like, "None of this is real. Let me deal with this. Get out of here, kid."
Right. He would have just opened a portal, and then all of the drones would be gone. That easy.
Yeah, man.
That's simple. I mean, that's the most frustrating part. I really enjoyed Far From Home. I'm gonna say this really quick. So, positives for me. I liked the jokes. I thought that the comedy was nice. I thought the comedy was better in this movie than in Doctor Strange. I feel like Doctor Strange, it did not tonally make sense. In this movie, it's a lighter tone. It's a teenage high school movie, so the comedy was fine. I really enjoyed that. The action sequences were great.
It was excessive, though.
It was excessive, I will admit. Yeah, but it wasn't all bad. But anyway, my biggest complaint is no Avengers in the movie at all. And I get it; they wanted to make a Spider-Man movie, but this is an Earth threat. This is a cosmic threat, dude. This is if the Earth is threatened, it's not Omega level, but it's something level threat, like a huge threat.
Right.
Right. So where's Wong? You know what I mean? Like, just have Wong in the movie for like.
Listen, man, this is the problem. This is the consequence of the MCU moving forward. They're just not going to address certain things. It's just not going to happen. Because listen, man, you got a crisis. What Peter could have done in that moment has been like, well, damn, I guess I need an alibi. Let me head over to Avengers HQ or wherever they're setting up now. Let me grab a quick time travel suit. I'll go grab a copy of myself, explain to him what's going on. I'll drop him in my life temporarily, and then I'll go run around as Spider-Man. Then people will realize I'm not actually Spider-Man, and then he can add confusion to the water and kind of, save face. And then drop the alternate reality version of him back in his timeline. And there you go. And Peter's identity being ousted, problems half semi-solved, right? There are things that
we're talking about
done, right? There are Avengers that should show up. There are opportunities for time travel that are going to be littered all throughout the MCU, and Marvel just simply is not going to address them. I think
this is what we talked about during our Endgame episode, our super long Endgame episode. That there are very convenient things that are introduced into the MCU that would just never be addressed. I'm just reiterating what Ross said. But time travel would have fixed this movie. He could have gone back and told his past self not to give up Edith. You know what I mean? There's a lot in this movie that could have been solved.
Well, that wouldn't make sense because of the time travel rules and the alternate reality stuff. He could go do that and create an alternate reality by doing so, but ultimately it still happens in the main timeline.
That's true. But at least he's saving something else, or taking 10 Spider-Men out of the timeline to help him.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah,
Cap out of the timeline to help, and that's what you were saying. So
I think after Endgame, he shouldn't be falling out of contact with the Avengers at this point.
Dude, Doctor Strange, him and Doctor Strange were on Titan for at least 10 minutes together before getting teleported.
I feel like at this point, they would have each other's phone numbers,
or something.
I just
smoke signals.
It's just it is definitely still pretty odd that Peter is so much on the outer circle of the Avengers after Endgame. You would think after saving the universe they would all kind of become a family, even if they didn't know each other.
Right, exactly.
There are certain things that kind of bring people together no matter what, and that Endgame was that moment, and it didn't happen. So it's kind of weird.
Listen, man, the space wizard should have helped. That's my most frustrating thing, guys. Because of how powerful Doctor Strange has been portrayed in the MCU, he could have just teleported there and fixed everything in 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe have a situation where he gets a little bit outsmarted by Beck, right? Something like that. But have Doctor Strange or Falcon or somebody in the finale of this movie.
Listen, man, do you know how strange it is to me that Peter trusted Beck so completely and so fully that quick?
Now, here's the thing. I'm gonna rebut that by saying Spider-Man just fought Thanos, so anything's kind of possible. You know what I mean? He just fought a freaking alien army. But
it's been 8 months.
Same coin though, Ross.
It's been 8 months.
If he's fighting these big battles, he should have more trust.
I think it's actually a bit of a disservice to Peter after everything he's gone through to have the emotional fortitude to survive all of that and kind of return to normal life, to then be like, oh yeah, then he would meet this guy who's seemingly cool and then hand over a multi-billion-dollar worldwide security system from Stark Industries to him after literally 2 conversations.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. It's 2 sides of the same coin. Part of me wants to think that he's so emotionally destroyed that he would give up that easily, but the other half of me wants to say he just fought Thanos. He just fought aliens. He should have a thicker shell than he does.
It's really hard to pull the emotional card when he's seemingly okay for the most part after 8 months.
Yeah,
there are moments where he breaks down, rightfully so. After the massive illusion sequence and getting hit by a train and sent to the Netherlands, yeah, that's when he would break down a bit even after 8 months have passed. But otherwise, he's mostly got it together. And that's a big problem with Far From Home as well, is the lack of personal consequences to his character. Nothing seems to be affecting him that much. True. May knowing his identity, they moved past that already. This whole final battle of Endgame moved past that already. everybody surrounding him got conveniently snapped away. So yeah, this cartoony Asian guy who's still who's after MJ and wants the relationship with her as well. He's that's it. That's the only thing that you've got that kind of fully and right in your face represents the time jump with Endgame. And it's like there's just so much lacking here in terms of the consequences that need to be felt by the characters that just doesn't happen in Far From Home. And yeah, man. So I mean, there's all of that, and as far as Mysterio goes, I've got to say though, and I think we both agree on this, it's like even I loved Mysterio's illusion sequences.
Mm-hmm.
Those were hands down the best moments of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But they were brief. There was only one, and then kind of one during the finale. But the big problem with Mysterio and the Stark Industries crew is, first of all, how many of those people got snapped away, first off, and are now back and are just like, oh yeah, like guys, let's be domestic terrorists. How does that work?
Though, Ross, is what we've talked about extensively. Is they show us a choreography scene and how long it takes for them to act out these things. But then during the illusion scene, he already has it all planned.
Right, yeah, man. But like before we even get to that, like what's the story of these freaking cartoon characters that have all assembled to do this from Stark Industries? Because, as far as half people getting snapped away, people on this team must have survived the snap. And then the people who just came back, I mean, maybe these guys were all corrupt enough they were all kind of on the same page, regardless of where they were in their lives, 5 years apart or not. But it's like they all came together and are like, yeah, we've got barf technology, and it's kind of more advanced now since 2016. Let's become domestic terrorists and make money creating artificial superheroes. So, I mean, it was like that was kind of a lot to take in originally and not really handled in the best of ways, because suddenly they're in a bar he's lifting up a glass and to Mysterio, to Peter Parker, like they somehow care about Peter Parker. I mean, I'm just kind of like, what is going? It was a very confusing scene.
Yeah, and then also I want to point out that the box of scraps guy.
Yeah.
Right. Why does he have such a heavy hatred towards Tony, when Obadiah Stane was the one giving him such a hard time, and he knew that he was working outside of Tony. He knew what he was doing. So I thought that was kind of a
maybe he developed a deep emotional inferiority complex toward Tony after that. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. There's just a lot of unanswered questions in terms in terms of these characters.
But it's a pretty big reveal that Quentin Beck directly worked with Tony on the barf technology.
He created it.
And that Tony basically took credit for it, which I think is kind of weird and unlike Tony at that point in his life.
I don't think he took credit for it, because it wasn't any signs of credit. When he's at the presentation, he's saying my little therapy experiment. He never overtly states that it's his technology. It's Stark technology, right? But then again, he scraps the project and then fires Beck because of the fact.
No, because he says I forget who he says the government wouldn't fund my little experiment, something like that along the line.
Yeah.
Right. He says it's implied that it's his, man. And that's the problem with cutting this in. Yeah. And I mean, very directly cutting it in. I mean, compositing Jake Gyllenhaal into those scenes looked a little rough, but it worked.
Oh, but also, Ross, you got to think about it, dude. If it's an industry thing, if it's a Stark industry, then he does own the technology. Right. So that's
honestly nitpicking more than anything.
That is very much nitpicking.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I appreciate it. I appreciated and that was really cool. And I appreciated the practicality of all this at first. Okay, he was the creator of the barf tech with Tony, and then everything that happened after Tony fired him, and okay, great. And then they go into the whole explainer sequence, and they show us the drones. They show us the drones have firepower. They can shoot. They've got concussive blasts. I think this was before the sequence on the bus with Peter, if I'm not mistaken, or after. I forget. I think it was after. So we had already kind of after, yeah. So we had already seen one of the drones, and now we see that Quentin Beck somehow has a lot more of the drones from that satellite.
Well, I mean, that's when he gets eaten.
Well, they're using the same satellite, I guess, is the idea.
I think the idea is that the box of scraps guy, he was the drone manufacturer, the creator, the scientist behind them. And those drones were used in Edith, but he created a small amount of drones used for the small illusions, and then as Edith is unlocked, they get access to the big army of drones.
Yeah, man. But again, you have this whole big scene of them in this big room choreographing their next fight, and it was all really cool, and it kind of made sense how this was working, and it was interesting. I mean, it was still a little weird how they were able to do lava. They didn't exactly make that one clear.
Yeah,
And various other elements and different things those drones should not be capable of, and they didn't show us they were capable of. But they were still trying to introduce a sense of practicality, and they were trying to make us believe in how Mysterio was an illusionist this whole time and a fake. And it was like, okay, I'm on board. And then eventually they cut to the second sequence after Mysterio realizes that they lost a piece of the illusion tech, and both MJ and Peter figured it out. And they cut into the whole next illusion sequence in this big abandoned building that he's designing to look like a shield facility or something. But it's like, then they just go off the wall, and he's just doing whatever he wants, and he's just making Peter see and feel whatever he wants. Yeah. And it was like, whoa. You just did this whole scene trying to make us believe in how these drones work and create Mysterio's illusions. You can't expect me to now suspend my disbelief after you just spent a whole scene trying to make me believe. And so that to me was rough. But that didn't make the sequence any less amazing. It was astonishing, especially, I mean, Peter not being able to really figure out what was real. I couldn't tell what was real. I didn't know which Nick Fury was real and which one wasn't. Fury was never even there at all to begin with. I mean, just really crazy and really well done. All of it. I mean, all the different Spider-Men that were physically attacking him. I mean, the Tony scene with Iron Man, the Iron Man suit and the skeleton in it rising out of the grave. I mean, that was the best part of that sequence, and all the different Mysterios walking together. I would pay just to watch that scene again.
Yeah. I want to say though, Ross. You know how we have the Nick Fury that picks him up in the car and takes him to the facility? Was that all a ruse? Because that wasn't exactly clear to me.
What'd you
say? So you know how Nick Fury picks him up in the car?
Sorry, you're cutting out.
You know how Nick Fury picks him up in the car?
Oh yeah, he picks him up in the car, right?
Right, and then he takes him to the facility?
Yeah.
Is that a fake Nick Fury?
Yeah, so I think that was just like one of Quentin Beck's drivers, or I think that was Beck himself in the mocap suit sitting there.
Yeah, it had to have been. Now, that was a little fuzzy to me, right? And we know that that's not Fury because of the fact that later on, we know it's not Fury or Talos because later on, Talos gets the message from Happy.
Right.
But I just feel like from a filmmaking perspective, now here's where I start nerding out because, I'm a film guy.
Uh-huh.
But this is from a filmmaking perspective where they needed to more intensely address that. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a big problem I have with this movie as a whole, is that there's a lot of things that are ambiguous, right? With the illusion tech, there's a lot of things left ambiguous, and this ties back to what Ross was saying about the rehearsal scene and about the things created.
Yeah, it's like, why do that at all, man?
Right? Why even try to explain? You can't explain half of it. Yeah,
and to me, another problem with Mysterio, as great as Jake Gyllenhaal is, this is a big thing that you kind of showed to, I forgot, you sent me something on Snapchat this morning that really just said it very briefly, very concise. Vulture had depth, Mysterio has lights. And that is the biggest problem between Vulture and Mysterio that makes Vulture the better villain. Vulture was practical. He was avoiding the Avengers. He was going under the radar and had direct connections to Peter Parker.
And his character
Mysterio
made sense,
has none of that, and instead is a cartoon character who is worried about Avengers showing up, but for whatever reason is bypassing all basic logic. And granted, he may not be the most emotionally stable guy, but they certainly make no effort to show you that he's emotionally unstable until like the very, very end. And to me, that was weird because it's like, that's a big part of Mysterio as a character from the source material is his psyche, right? And how emotional and stable he is. That's a big part of Quentin Beck's story. But then it's like, in this movie, they gloss over all of that And to me, it's just strange with this little group of ex-Stark Industries employees who have now all agreed to become domestic terrorists with this technology and help Jake Gyllenhaal as Quentin Beck. Do none of them think that at no point, like what happens in the movie, one of those illusion tech pieces is going to break off or get lost, and then somebody's going to notice something? Or that the Avengers are going to show up and Doctor Strange is going to see right through what's going on? What is this?
Yeah, there's not a lot of practicality in the
Like,
movie. A big difference that I think Ross kind of glossed over.
but that's
is
the
fact
problem.
that
Is like
we
these are
saw-
cartoon characters.
Right.
By
No,
just
that's my
ignoring
point.
the very real possibility of this happening.
In what's it called? In Homecoming, we see the practical measures that they take to dodge the Avengers, right?
Right.
And in this movie, we see the practical measures they take to create these illusions. But we don't see anything about Nick Fury. We don't see anything about how they're hiding their technology. We don't see anything. There's a lot of things left open. Whereas in Homecoming, which I just watched, were every box was ticked off. Every single box was ticked off. They dodged the Avengers by doing this. They gain their tech by doing this. They find members by doing this.
Right.
They pay themselves, make a living doing this.
Yeah, man. And so I think that was all. It's just very odd for them to backtrack on all that careful attention to these characters in the narrative. And we gotta mention this as well, is like this movie didn't stretch Jake Gyllenhaal as an actor at all. Yeah. And for me, Michael Keaton as the Vulture, that actually took something from him to pull off that character the right way, I feel.
Oh yeah. That was him really flexing his acting muscles.
Yeah, man. And so it left me, if anything, wanting to go watch, what's the movie Crawler that Jake Gyllenhaal's in?
Nightcrawler, yeah, that movie's really good.
I want to go see that movie, man, because I want to see Jake Gyllenhaal act.
Okay, Ross, really quick. In Nightcrawler, he plays a deranged maniac who is extremely subtle. Extremely subtle. He plays a subtle maniac, a conniving, disgusting human being, extremely subtly. And what does he do in this movie? Kind of over-the-top comic villain. And that's probably because of the way that the writers wrote the movie. Yeah. But let me tell you, in Nightcrawler, he is conniving. He is thorough. He is unsettling. When you watch Nightcrawler, your stomach turns because of how disgusting he is as a human being and how well it's acted as well. It's believable that he's this disgusting.
And I feel like you could have easily had elements as strong as that here in Far From Home.
I agree.
That's the problem. Is Marvel wanted it to be lighthearted.
Right.
But again, I don't know why they decided to abandon the balance of Spider-Man Homecoming in favor of the Ant-Man and the Wasp formula, literally written by those guys. I mean, it's like that they brought those guys on for this, and there's just so much more that there's so much more detail to Spider-Man's story, to his character, to everything you can do with a movie like this that's just not taken advantage of. It's like you're given a box of toys, and then you're given a checklist of things to pull out of that box to make the most of of the fun you can have. And these guys just only pulled out like half the toys from the toy box. And to me, I don't understand how you do that with a multi-million-dollar movie when you have the greatest actor to ever play Spider-Man right here, ready to make great Spider-Man movies. How do you waste time like this? That to me is kind of weird. In terms of like what you could have Kraven show up briefly, or have him orchestrate the events of what's been going on. Have Kraven be the reason the Avengers can't detect Mysterio.
Can you just give me 1 second to talk about how much I love Kraven, Ross?
Yeah.
Can I just gush for a second? Kraven in the comic books, he's such an over-the-top character. All he wants to do is hunt down Spider-Man, so he shows how good of a hunter he is. I love Spider-Man mythos because all of the villains are freaking animals, right? You have Vulture, you have Rhino, you have Scorpion, all these animal characters, and then you have this guy, the Hunter, Kraven the Hunter. Right? It shows how much different he is, how much more threatening he is. Because animals fight each other every day in the wild. But who's the apex? The hunter. You know what I mean? The hunter is the apex predator. So to see that dynamic in Spider-Man comics is just so fun. To see Spider-Man dodge this lunatic maniac who just wants him dead. Right? I absolutely love Kraven the Hunter, and I think him hunting Spider-Man through Europe would have been so much better than this. And I really would want that movie to come either before Endgame or 4 movies after Endgame. Because Endgame really needed to... Endgame and Infinity War really needed... we really needed a movie that respected the events of those 2 movies. We really needed something to bridge us. So to see Kraven the Hunter hunt Peter Parker and his group of friends through Europe, I don't know. I mean, that just sounds like the perfect Spider-Man movie to me.
And we got to talk about that on the last show. Is like the problem is Spider-Man movies should never be burdened with massive cinematic universe altering stakes like that, and that's why it never should have been the direct follow up to Endgame. I mean, that's why I don't consider. Listen, man, I don't agree with this idea that Spider-Man Far From Home closes out the Infinity Saga. No. That was Endgame. Shut up. No. And Spider-Man for me is what begins the new phase of the MCU. And we've arrived. And, I don't buy into that at all. But there definitely needed to be something else. A Captain Marvel sequel, obviously it doesn't work because Captain Marvel had her first movie this year. A Doctor Strange sequel would have been a really great spot. This would have been a really great opportunity for a Doctor Strange 2, 2019.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Doctor Strange 2 right now to kind of...
Like, Doctor Strange 2 could have shouldered that burden.
Yes, I agree. So if you have a character like that, if you have a character like Doctor Strange, you can explain the more what are they called, oblique concepts, the less straightforward things, the more paradoxical things about the MCU, and it would have been fine. A movie maybe where Doctor Strange cleans up, some space energy that gets screwed up throughout the universe.
Well, no, I want Carl Mordo to be the next villain of in a Doctor Strange movie.
Oh, yeah. But maybe Mordo's taking advantage of the events of Endgame, right? He's taking advantage of a higher amount of gamma radiation, whatever, right? But you can explain these concepts, these very oblique and very weird concepts in a movie like that way better than you can explain them in a Spider-Man movie. Like I said, if you remove Endgame from your mind when you're watching Spider-Man, it can become so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, but you shouldn't have to do that, and that's the problem. Is Far From Home is essentially a victim of the MCU, right?
Yeah, I that's a very good way to put it.
And so again, it's still the movie is still fun. It's still really enjoyable, and I'm excited to go see it a third time. I really am. I think that the whole problem with Mysterio and him not being a legitimate hero is, again, it's like it's surprising me that even like the Skrulls bought into his act.
Yeah,
I get it that Talos is a bit of a goof, man, but 20 years have passed. You think he picked up on it?
Right.
At least a little bit. But it was funny at the end where he was like, it was all very convincing.
Yeah.
How was I supposed to know? But I feel like Talos, with everything he's seen, would have been, if anything, he would have been the guy to figure it out. I mean, hell, Talos was the guy who figured out what was going on with the Kree.
Right, true. That's true. The deception there, yeah, he's the anti-deception.
Yeah, man. But listen, man, I'd much rather they character assassinate Talos.
Than Fury, yeah.
And Ben Mendelsohn as Talos is great, and I'm happy to see that guy show.
Oh yeah, super fun impersonation of the character.
Now, Tait, to kind of, what do you think? We kind of both agree on this. This might be the worst iteration of Mary Jane.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely the worst iteration of Mary Jane, in my opinion. That's not a problem. That is like not on Zendaya's shoulders at all. That is not her fault. It's not the way it was acted. It's the way it was written.
Like in real life, man, Tom Holland and man, any huge Spider-Man fans out there or like the fandoms, if they see this, oh man, we are finished. But it's like,
hey, I'm part of that fandom. I want to say this.
No, right, but now. I mean like people who are like hard. I mean, like who have accounts just for this on Twitter.
No, dude, here's the thing. Okay, I want to say this really quick. Was the Sam Raimi version of Mary Jane amazing? No. Was it serviceable? Was it okay? Yes. I'm not a fan. No. We just played Spider-Man PS4, Ross and I. I mean, that's the biggest Spider-Man thing in our memory besides comic books, at least for me, because there hasn't really been a big Spider-Man story recently.
We said this. I'm now looking to Spider-Man PS4 for like to have a satisfying Spider-Man narrative. My direction is
that's my Mary Jane. That's my comic book Mary Jane. Spider-Man PS4 is the best. Is just the best Mary Jane in my opinion.
I wouldn't go that far, but
I think so. Say, not the one outside of comic books. Outside of comic books, dude, Spider-Man PS4 is my go-to Mary Jane.
Right. I was gonna say there are much better versions of Mary Jane in the comics.
No. I mean, extra media besides MJ.
Right.
Being this detective investigator character is so good for.
I didn't agree with the character arc they forced on her in Spider-Man PS4, but otherwise she's great.
No, but her interactions with Peter is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree there.
Her interactions with Peter are freaking awesome.
But you know, back to the main point is like they brought Zendaya on. I was like, okay, they're kind of character. Michelle Jones as we knew her in Spider-Man, and then at the end MJ, and now we're kind of just calling her MJ, even though apparently her real name is Michelle Jones. I don't know what they're doing there. And then it's like with her character being even more awkward than Peter, it kind of removes the attraction that I feel like Peter had to Mary Jane in the first place in the comics. He kind of looks to Mary Jane because she's inspirational to him.
Yeah.
Right? She's an inspiration to him. He looks up to her, and that's why he's drawn to her, right? But then it's like, and granted, I just don't see I don't see that being the case with this version of Spider-Man. He's attracted to her because they're the same, because they're both awkward. And listen, man, it's hard for me because I don't really get the attraction here. Mm-hmm. She's so awkward at the point where she makes really bizarre and offhanded, dark, depressing, crude jokes that are just very far from who Peter is.
Yeah, dude, she's a goth girl in this movie for half the time. She's talking about all these deaths and things that happen. It's really
and it's even more weird that Peter is just suddenly interested in her when he wasn't in the last movie.
Yeah, but that's fine, dude. Teenagers are teenagers. You know what I mean? It's been years.
If this is supposed to be his life partner and this is Mary Jane Watson, I take issue with that.
But here's the thing. Okay, so I just wanna
I get it that like as far as teenagers go, that's how it happens at first. That it can be very sudden. Yeah. But we needed to see that.
Let's just talk about what Mary Jane is in the comics.
Tait, the first scene in Far From Home is Peter explaining to Ned his whole checklist for how he wants to convince MJ to be his girlfriend when they get to Venice.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Let's just talk about what MJ is, right? Let's just talk about what MJ is. MJ was introduced as a counter, as a foil to Gwen Stacy. That is why she was introduced. Gwen Stacy died, Peter was upset, and MJ was a carefree person that he went on dates with. And then she started, coming into her own, started being a more investigative character. In some iterations, they make her an investigative journalist, right? There are things about Mary Jane that there are so many different Mary Jane iterations, right? We have so many personalities, but the one thing that stays consistent, Ross, is that she's more confident than Peter is. She's confident, she's outward, and she's this big,
right? She's inspiring, man. Again, going back to what I said, Peter looks up to her.
Right, and now I wouldn't say he looks up to her, but she's kind of his rock.
I mean, not in the sense like she's older and a mentor figure, but I mean somebody, that he looks to you for inspiration. Yeah, that's it. That's all.
Yeah. I would agree, but like Gwen Stacy in the comic books, dude. She's a stage performer sometimes and a journalist sometimes, and she's this, that, and the other thing. And this is not a refreshing new take on Mary Jane, in my opinion. You got to keep the confidence in Mary Jane. You have to, because it's a direct foil to Peter, her being so confident.
Yeah, man, and it's like, I don't know if they're trying to portray like an original phase that Mary Jane went through, and that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah, but
it's like, listen, man, how long are they actually going to have Zendaya in the MCU?
True.
I don't know if she's going to Gwyneth Paltrow this and stick around for that long. It's like, so I think this is a waste of time having her be like this. Um, and it looks like they've abandoned it now for because in the post credit scene, man, I think it looks like right.
I'm sorry, Rush. What was that?
I think looking when you get to the post credit scene, finally, kind of it seems like she's moving out. She's kind of moving out of that persona,
Out of that shell, almost like
yeah,
it's almost a defensive high school shell.
yeah, man. But I get that you can throw in the phrase "opposites attract," but the problem is they're not really opposites. Besides her dark humor, she's so close to Peter's awkwardness that it's just a little too much of a departure from the source material. Like we were just talking about,
Yeah.
Mary Jane is just not that character, and
Yeah, she's so many different things, but she's always confident. That's the thing. She's always confident. She's always a rock for Peter.
um. So yeah, man, that was. It's not my. I don't know where they're going with this iteration of Jay. So far, I'm not into it.
Yeah, but Tom Holland. Oh my God, that's
and listen, man, I'll go as far as to say, I said this here already, but it's like Zendaya and Tom Holland have more chemistry in real life than they do in the movies.
Way more.
And even that chemistry that they have off screen outside the MCU during the movies isn't necessarily stronger than what we already saw previously with Andrew Garfield, Spider-Man, and Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy. Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield had some of the greatest they had some of the greatest chemistry that I've ever seen put to screen. Honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, nobody has one up that chemistry.
No.
Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone were so perfect together; it was ridiculous.
You know what? I'm gonna go off on a whim, and I'm gonna say it's unfortunate that we didn't get to see Amazing Spider-Man 3. Like, if Amazing Spider-Man was of the quality, or if Amazing Spider-Man 2 was of the quality as Amazing Spider-Man 1, then we would have gotten a third one. And
yeah.
I just the dynamic, and this is the most classic. This is like from this freaking 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man loses Gwen Stacy and goes into this weird depression where MJ's introduced and he starts really losing it, and that would have been such a great thing to see.
What, in the Andrew Garfield movies?
Yeah, in
but
any
at the
movie.
same time, man, it's like even that would have been a problem for the Andrew at that point, because it's like they were going to bring in Shailene Woodley as MJ, and she wasn't going to have as much chemistry as Emma Stone.
Oh no, but that would have been great, to see that dynamic of Pete being like, "Oh man, I miss Gwen." Okay, there's this comment, Master Sword, a Zelda fan, man of culture, says the biggest issue with the MCU with MCU Peter Parker is that it's all about Iron Man and not Spider-Man. Vulture had beef with Tony, not Peter. Beck had beef with Tony, not Peter. Everything is about Tony and not Peter. I want to say, now Vulture was done extremely well. Vulture had beef with Tony because he just thought he was a dick. He didn't have direct issue.
But I see what he's saying.
I see what he's saying too.
There's no detachment. There's no villain that's exclusively Peter's problem.
But here's the thing. Now I'm going to combat that by saying the motive of him using technology to make money is driven by Tony Stark. Yes, right. The motive of making money and being a supervillain is Tony Stark. But with Vulture, the villain side of it, him being a conniving supervillain, is directly thwarted by Peter, so his main focus is turned to Peter. Stark is just making him money. That's all Stark did. It made him money, and it pissed him off. But Peter is an actual antagonist to his cause. Peter's an actual issue for Vulture, not Tony Stark. And I think that's a lot better than Beck. Tony was the direct competitor to Beck because he fired Beck. He used his technology for a therapeutic experiment. He pissed him off personally. Whereas with Vulture, he wasn't personally attacked by Tony Stark. He acted upon Tony Stark's mistake. He took Chitauri technology. So I feel like Vulture was handled a lot better, because when creating a Spider-Man villain, you have to look at the streets. You don't look at the sky. You don't look at other planets, right?
The streets look too Tait. We're not in New York.
Well, with Vulture, let's just say. So Vulture is
being created. We're in New York City there either.
Well, Vulture is being created at the top, right? Vulture is being created by the top by Tony. He's being created by Tony, and he's being thwarted by Peter. So he's not fighting against Tony. He's not doing this in spite of Tony. Tony's making him money. He's doing this to make money. And Peter Parker is the direct antagonist, the direct foil to that. He's the direct foil.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
yeah, I mean, but yeah. I do wish... I hope that the next villain doesn't have any connection to Iron Man.
Oh, yeah, dude. I just want Kraven the Hunter to hunt down Spider-Man.
I mean, listen, man.
Kraven the Hunter can hunt down Peter
Again,
Parker.
I enjoy Spider-Man Far From Home. But we had this conversation, Tate. Enough is enough. He needs to be back in New York City, fighting the iconic villains. You need to bring in Norman Osborn, get Oscorp going. We need to start seeing Green Goblin or whoever else. I don't care if you do Carnage or if you do Kraven. You need to be in New York City. It's way too early
for Carnage, dude. It's way too... You know what's really unfortunate?
Again, I'm just saying he needs to be fighting the iconic villains that we know are out there.
In New York City.
I mean, it's enough is enough, man, is all I'm saying. He's had his time with the Avengers now. We need to have a break. We need to have a movie or two with Peter in New York.
Russ, like I would really like to have seen.
And dude, I don't even care if they need an excuse. Maybe in a few years they do a new Daredevil movie and they bring in Charlie Cox. That would be a dream come true. And then you have Tom Holland show up in that, and there you go. We still have more time with Peter in New York.
In New York, right? On Manhattan Island in Hell's Kitchen.
You know, it's but I'm telling you, if they come out and they're like, oh, it was too dangerous for Peter to stay in New York, I'm not going to go see the movie.
Yeah, I will be very frustrated.
I don't know that I'm going to rush out to see the next Spider-Man movie if it's not in New York. So like 80% of the time.
So Ross, really quick.
Yeah.
Think about Infinity War and Endgame happening 5 years later. So instead of 11 years after Iron Man, they happen 15, 16. And in those extra couple of years, we get the 3 Spider-Man movies that build up Spider-Man the way that we've been saying. And then during Infinity War, when he's on Titan, he gets the symbiote suit, and that kicks off the whole Secret War subline in Infinity War. Do you know how awesome that would have been? To see his struggle with the black suit, to see his struggle, all that kind of stuff, and then having Far From Home or the 4th Spider-Man movie be an in between Infinity War and Endgame. Like maybe he doesn't get snapped out, and he has to struggle with his suit. Oh, that would have been such a great way to introduce.
Yeah, man. Unfortunately, there just wasn't time for it.
And there wasn't time for it, and that's
Feige and crew might have done something similar, but
yeah, there's so much that's been left out on because they jumped into Spider-Man so quickly.
I think that is easily how you can link the symbiote in, is that it was like an experiment on Titan that was still left behind that got caught into. I feel like the problem is though, his suit would have picked up on symbiote being in it.
Oh yeah. A Stark suit like that?
He was in the Iron Spider suit. That wouldn't have gone under the radar.
Yeah.
That doesn't work, unfortunately, even though it would be cool to be like in Spider-Man 3, symbiote shows up and it's been dormant and, Oscorp grabbed it and now somebody, escaped from Oscorp and whatever. Do whatever you want.
Right, I'm going to start fighting with the comments section, Ross. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be doing this. Master Sword. In the comics, Peter's life is not easy. Right, it's not easy because of Ben's death, but when he's a kid, it's a lot easier than when he's a college student and an adult. So I think right now in the MCU, it's fine that Peter has no consequence because Peter is 16, 17, that age. Right? We don't get those big Spider-Man stories until he's a college student, until he's an adult. When Peter Parker's a kid in the comic books, life is all about Ben's death and struggling with Spider-Man. But it gets a hell of a lot worse during college.
This is the opportunity to introduce those emotional stakes, especially with Mysterio. And that was the big thing, is Marvel trying to make this like Ant-Man and the Wasp and trying to make this as lighthearted as they possibly could. Right. Because in the comics, I mean, beyond what we see in this movie, Mysterio messes with Peter's head in some pretty demonstrable ways.
And it should have destroyed Peter. It really should have, dude. Teenage Peter Parker, he should not have an easy life. He should not have an easy life.
This would have been the moment where Peter could have had his first panic attack. I mean,
he should have.
There's so much they could have done here, but they're so choppy about where they insert the emotional stakes. And this kind of goes back to also, first of all, after that big sequence, he gets hit by a train, somehow is okay enough to crawl into the train. And then he wakes up in the Netherlands in a prison. So I guess now they know who Spider Monkey is or Night Monkey is in the Netherlands. And then Happy shows up in the jet after he talks to a very nice guy over there, gives him his phone. But then on that jet scene, on board, they're having the conversation. I just really miss him. I'm sorry for snapping at you, Happy. I totally. But that was the basis of it. And then you're never going to be Tony. Nobody could ever be Tony, not even him. And to have you go that. But then it's like he's like, I need a suit. And then they open the back of the jet, and there's the whole armory where Tony, has a whole like machine back there ready to go to make new Spidey suits for Peter and any suits, it seems like, for that matter, with the nanotech. Just on the go. And then they start playing the same music from the first Iron Man movie. I'm not cultured in music, so Tate, you'll have to fill in here.
Yeah, it was AC/DC Back in Black. And Peter makes a really great Led Zeppelin joke. And
but it's Ross, like that was
no. Here's the best part of that Led Zeppelin joke.
That scene was bipolar.
That scene was bipolar.
It was telling you that definitely. Peter can never be Tony and making that clear. And then Happy plays that music and pretty much directly contradicts the whole scene. And it was. I remember in the theater, I was like, wait, what? But anyway, man, I it is what it is. It's okay. I think that a lot of the rest of the humor kind of lands pretty well for the most part. Some of it is a little forced, like the Ned and Betty joke kind of got under my skin a little bit. Yeah. It was a little too much. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It was a little too much.
No. Ned and Betty, it went a little too far. Definitely.
I mean, this movie definitely scraped up against the surface of being Ant-Man and the Wasp bad if it wasn't for Mysterio. But, another thing, too, is I feel like visually, the movie has no style.
Yeah, no, you're 100%. The cinematography during the illusion, oh my god, it's incredible. But
a lot of the time, this looks like a TV show.
Not as bad as Avengers looked like a TV show, but that was better tonally.
But seriously, dude, aside from the major sequences, the scenes in the hotels, the scenes outside on the bridge, I mean, there are so many shots that are just like, yeah, this could have been. This could have been a TV show movie, a TV movie on Netflix or whatever. But anyway, another big problem with Far From Home is even though the swinging in the final battle was cool and him going up inside the drone mesh, the big drone swarm and disabling them, the last thing that I wanted is for the final fight of Spider-Man Far From Home, when we've got Mysterio in the movie, is for him to swarm of freaking mindless drones. Literally, the final battle for is him just taking out drones.
Come on, dude. Okay, you know what they should have done? They should have made Quentin Beck part of the freaking magic guys. What are they called? I don't know what they're called in the MCU.
Or they should have added to Quentin Beck's story that he at least got to a physical point and started to train a little bit after he kind of loses it for being betrayed by Tony, and gets to a physical point to where he can at least go toe-to-toe with Peter briefly. Just something.
Just like 3 minutes, you know what I mean? Like
just anything other than him relying so heavily on his illusions and having Peter fight a swarm of drones. It's like, that was something that was missing here is, yes, it's implied that he might have some kind of actual powers because, again, they abandoned their own explainer for how the illusion tech works. So you're led to believe that maybe there's something else going on for how Mysterio is able to do all of this. But they don't do that. They don't really go anywhere with that. And I mean, it's just kind of bizarre. I mean, it's satisfying in the end when he ultimately stops Quentin Beck's gun from going off. And by the way, Tate, I saw the movie twice, but I couldn't tell how Quentin got shot and how that whole thing played out.
Yeah.
Because he disabled the safety on the drones, so he got shot. But then that was an illusion of him. Or he made an illusion really quick, but he was still shot either way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very, that was kind of confusing. I guess that was the point. I'm supposed to know it's real, but either way, that was satisfying the way Peter grabbed the gun and said, no more illusions. I appreciated that. That was the most powerful moment in the movie was right there when he stops Quentin Beck. But it's just the jokes just take up 70% of the movie, man. 70% of the movie is just all jokes and BS.
Yeah, at least for me, it didn't pull me out as much as they did in Doctor Strange. The Doctor Strange jokes really hurt because that movie has such a consistent tone besides the jokes.
I think future Spider-Man installments need to look to Spider-Verse for how Spider-Man needs to be
Yes.
done.
Lighthearted, but
And how you
still high
balance
stakes.
jokes with emotional stakes.
God,
And high stakes,
Spider-Verse is such a freaking good movie, dude.
I mean, Spider-Verse
That's my
could
favorite
not be
Spider-Man
more
movie, by the way.
Oh,
That's the best representation of Spider-Man we've had in any sort of media besides comic books. Like that and Spider-Man PS4.
If they just use Spider-Verse as a blueprint for how to balance all the elements that make Spider-Man great for a movie.
Golly. I mean,
We'd
now
be in
I'm just
good shape.
frustrated because that movie is so much better than this. And it's so much better than Homecoming, and it's so much better than any studio's ever been able to produce for Spider-Man. I mean, the action was fun in Spider-Verse. The characterizations made sense. You know, Miles Morales, despite being a kid, he was, fun-loving, but he had stakes with his uncle. You know what I mean? He had these big emotional things.
Part of me is really looking forward to Miles being introduced later so we can start to forget everything we're missing out on.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean, like, that would be a great distraction from everything that we can't do now with MCU Spider-Man. And yeah, man, so I mean, that was all fine. But some of the jokes, like Peter Tingle, it was like, okay.
Peter Tingle was funny, I thought. Like the
I
first
thought it was
instance
funny.
of it.
If they mentioned it one more time, I was going to lose. That would bother me.
May bringing it up was funny. Happy bringing it up was less funny, but
if they did it one more time, I would have been mad. But it was and then oh my god, dude, the opening sequence, like I get that it's been 8 months. I get you're dealing with Go Happy Aunt May. It's been 8 months and everybody's kind of starting to, but the fact that they made a joke out of it and called it the blip, I swear, dude, in that, and I'm kind of going all the way back to the beginning of the movie now, but it's like in that moment, I kind of wanted somebody to speak up, and it's like, oh yeah, we lost our families in the blips, and it's like, have a kid be like, I thought my mom, like, I was 5 years old, like a 10-year-old kid be like, I was 5 and just went half my life without my mother. It's like, and you guys are reducing this down to a joke. And, have a moment, I guess it would have detracted from the, but just something to show the stakes of it and how it's affecting people. Have a kid kind of take offense to the joke of, like, just calling the blip. And, like, then you get to the back of in the room there, and it's like, and Happy's going on, and it's like, oh, you got a beard? That's nice. Yeah, it's a beard. It's a blip beard. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
That happened in Endgame a few times, too, where it's just like, in my mind, I'm just thinking, what are we doing?
Man, this conversation's making me like Spider-Man Far From Home a lot less. When I came out of the theater, I had a lot of fun with it because it's a very fun movie.
Yeah, man, and there's
a lot of issues.
Again, it is fun to watch. It's there are certain fundamentals that you can't take for granted about this. That we've got. First of all, we've got Peter Parker in the MCU. That will always be a win, no matter how
the best live action Peter Parker we've ever had. I mean, dude,
the best live action Peter Parker
carries this movie. Holy crap! I mean, it's very overt how much he carries the movie.
Yeah, man.
I mean, talk about a leading man, dude.
I really hope that Tom Holland will Wolverine this and just really stick this out for as long as possible. I hope that he doesn't get burnt out. I really hope that isn't the case because he is the greatest Spider-Man the world has ever had. Live action, yeah. And I just really hope that they can take this version of Spider-Man. That's impossible now because of how much you're missing out. You're missing out on because of the reveals in this movie, because of how they're handling MJ, because of Aunt May not caring about his secret identity because it's been 8 months. So all that happened off screen. This will never be the definitive version of Spider-Man, Tate, and we have to look. If we want the definitive version of Spider-Man, we have to look to Spider-Man PS4.
Spider-Man PS4, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that franchise. Dude, yeah. May in the comic books doesn't want Peter to be Spider-Man. It's so freaking dangerous. Why is May so
gloss over that after Uncle Ben?
Yeah,
I think is like I get.
Oh man, dude. I mean, now I'm thinking about it.
It's just hard to argue, Tate, because it's like they delved into these dark moments with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and people didn't like them.
Right.
it's like these. It's so hard to find this balance, and so I guess part of the problem does lay at the feet of the audience because it's like then they do those moments and people take issue with them.
Yeah.
But somehow Spider-Verse achieved a balance like no other, and same with Spider-Man PS4. But the way people perceive movies is weird, Tate.
It's so hard. It's just such a hard. There's so many hard things about filmmaking, dude. So many balances that need to be achieved.
Because people loved Ant-Man and the Wasp somehow. The movie's hot garbage. I don't get it, but
I
it
don't
worked.
like that movie at all.
I love the figures I made. I'm still proud of those, but it's like it's a weird time to have Spider-Man in the MCU because Marvel really has cold feet about what they can do and what they should do. It's like it's like they've made it very clear that they're very afraid of taking one misstep with the character that they kind of did anyway. It's like they've created a no-win scenario in their minds, kind of taking the character to places that he shouldn't necessarily go. And taking and I we've kind of given our thoughts here at length. I don't really want to talk about the jokes too much. They're littered throughout the whole movie. Some of them are more clever than others.
Yeah, I just want to close this. I just want to close this by saying, dude, Tom Holland is such an incredible Spider-Man. I mean,
Yeah, man.
It's just he takes the script that he's given and he acts it so well. I mean, I really feel like I'm flipping through the pages of a comic book whenever he's on screen. But when
If I'm being honest, I hope that Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio will show up later on with the Sinister Six if we ever get there.
Can you please have freaking superpowers?
Yeah.
Oh my god! Now he's an illusionist, dude. He's a magician in the comic books, but it writes a very fine line between human ability and superpower ability. You know what I mean? Mysterio is sometimes he's powered up, sometimes he's not, and I really want to see a powered up Mysterio, man.
You know what sucks, Tate? I just thought about it. We're never gonna have this version of Peter Parker having the job of the Daily Bugle.
Nope.
What a crime!
I mean, it's not necessary.
I think it is. I think it's really if you want a good source. Listen, Tate, if you want a good source for jokes for future Spider-Man movies, that Daily Bugle is it.
See, so like here's the difference between you and me, dude. Like your perception of Spider-Man is so kind of locked into.
You're cutting out a lot.
Sorry, dude. Well, anyway, these conversations are so interesting to me because you have a very Sam Raimi like 90s kind of interpretation of Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And my interpretation of Spider-Man is like the clone arc. You know what I mean? The clone arcs, and then the really old Kraven the Hunter books, and like those things. Like, I don't think Daily Bugle is necessary for the character, but I think it'd be a lot of fun.
But to me, I feel like Sam Raimi and his trilogy created new flag posts that really kind of established new fundamentals for what Spider-Man is.
I agree with you 100%.
And that's why these things are important to not just me, but a whole generation of people.
Yeah.
Our entire generation.
Master Sword brings up a good point here in the comments that he thinks the MCU would take a darker approach, but they're going back to the formula. Yeah, dude. I mean, I have a lot of problems with the MCU, and I've been talking about this a lot with Ross, that I'm very much a fan of the good things in the MCU, right? But comics-wise, and most of the movies, dude, like what's it called? Black Panther completely lost me. Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp completely lost me. Age of Ultron lost me. A lot of Marvel movies lose me because it's so light. You know what I mean? Like, look back at Winter Soldier. That movie is not a light movie. They have jokes in it, but used very sparingly. And it creates, in my opinion, the best MCU movie. I think Winter Soldier by far is the best MCU movie.
Isn't that crazy that a movie that fully embraced MCU is considered by a lot of people to be the greatest MCU movie to ever be made?
Right? And they don't focus on that, dude. They focus on, the box office numbers that relate to, sales of children's tickets. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of kids enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp 2. A lot of families enjoyed Ant-Man and the Wasp 2. Winter Soldier, that's one of my favorites. Iron Man 1 with the alcoholism.
This whole deal, Tate, though, it makes me wonder what this generation is going to see as the major fundamentals of Spider-Man. Like, this Spider-Man is going to... Like, what are people... what is this generation now, not ours, but this generation coming up now with these movies, what are they going to see Spider-Man as after we get through this version of the character in the MCU? Like, what will they look back on and see that defines the character? Is an interesting thought for me. Because for us, people who grew up with the Sam Raimi trilogy, maybe the Andrew Garfield movies, it's always all about Peter and MJ, being different than Peter and their relationship and his friendship with Harry Osborn and Oscorp and the Green Goblins and Dr. Octopus and the Daily Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson and Venom and all these crazy things that, kind of solidified themselves for us. And then maybe that, I wonder, like, what's that going to look like for people coming up with these movies now?
It's going to be interesting, man. I mean, Captain America before... I just want to say, like, Captain America before the MCU was a joke character. And then the MCU brings him into this very solid, complex character. I mean, Captain America was just a dickhead patriot before the MCU. Tony Stark was just a spoiled genius until the MCU. And the MCU has done a lot of great for some characters. But like Spider-Man, like we're talking about, I mean, Spider-Man is such an emotionally complex character, and I talk about this every time we talk about Spider-Man because Spider-Man is blatantly overpowered. Spider-Man is blatantly overpowered. When you look at
not like he is in PS4. Oh my god!
But I mean, dude, he can lift a sail barge in a comic book. He is blatantly overpowered. He has so much internal conflict in the comic books. He's struggling with balancing Spider-Man and life.
I feel like that was a downside to Spider-Man Far. It was, I feel, the main internal conflict with Peter should have been who's going to be the next Iron Man. What are we all doing now in a life post Endgame? How do I handle this without any backup from and that to me was like. It was such a side point. It's such a side story for Peter. And what took the main focus as his internal struggles were he just wants to go on a trip with his friends and ignore super major threats that could potentially destroy the entire world. And
destroy his friends.
It was very for a Spider-Man that has met Tony Stark, that has gone to Titan, that has seen the final battle at Avengers HQ and watched Iron Man die, the only mentor that he had to look up to now after Uncle Ben. It's like to have that Peter Parker who has seen the greatest universe-threatening stakes and fight against them with the most, well-equipped beings like the universe has to offer, whether it be the Avengers, the Guardians, the Asgard, was there. To have that, the next internal conflict for that Spider-Man to be, I don't know if I want to do this. Well, this version of Spider-Man should have been like, oh my God, with what's actually possible, I absolutely should help with these smaller threats because I can. Mm-hmm. So I think that should have been cut out completely. And the main internal conflict for him should have been dealing with the loss of Tony. And it should have been who's going to be the next Iron Man. Should have been
He has that breakdown, with
but it's too brief.
But that's
it. Brief. It's only one scene, and then it's just kind of echoed.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised we didn't see more. Like when he's staring at the mural, dude, I really thought he was gonna have a breakdown. Yeah. I thought that would have made more sense.
Anyway, man, again, to close, Spider-Man Far From Home is not the movie that I was hoping it would be, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to seeing it a third time. Tate, I think you are too. The post-credit scenes are crazy, and I'm, we'll see where those post-credit scenes will take the future of the MCU. I hope that they'll eventually be able to kind of make the most out of this iteration of Spider-Man as we move forward and eventually get to the Sinister Six, eventually do all the big things, Miles Morales, maybe a live action Spider-Verse. Who knows what they plan on doing with Spider-Man up to this point. I hope it'll be in New York.
Yep. Anyway, in closing, like I said earlier, I rate Spider-Man Far From Home a B, and I would give it a watch it once. I think that's a good idea, dude. Like how many times you think somebody should watch it? I mean, maybe that's a new thing for the podcast. I mean, we're always learning and changing. So, like, how many times would you watch this, Ross? If you had to give a recommendation.
Well, I'm a nut job, so I mean, I'm gonna see it one more time and probably end off at 3 times because I'm just insane. And I see every Marvel movie multiple times.
I think watch it once. I give it a B and a watch it once.
I think you could absolutely watch this once and be satisfied until the Blu-ray.
Until. So Ross was watch it once. It's like wait for the Blu-ray and then binge watch it. And then for me, watch it
like
once,
in terms of watching it in theaters, I thought that's what we were talking about.
No, dude, I mean like watch it once and like I'm good. Like I don't need to see this movie.
No,
again,
dude,
like,
I mean, people are bound to see it again. You know, for
right,
like eventually future marathons and then rewatching. You know, people are going to see the movie times. I think regardless, it's going to be on in the background at some point, like a year down the line, once a television network gets the license to it. You know.
So it's a C plus B.
Maybe in terms of watching it, this is such a weird rating system. Just like how many times you should watch a movie for your lifetime. What?
No, not a lifetime. I just mean like foreseeable. Like how many times do you need to watch?
You can watch it a couple times and then like go 3 or 4 years and not see it again and be fine.
Yeah. I'm gonna watch it probably once, twice, maybe. I mean, like, okay,
yeah, man. Ratings are kind of arbitrary and kind of stupid, but I'm going to give mine anyway. I give Spider-Man: Far From Home, honestly, a generous 6 out of 10.
Yep, I rate it a little bit higher than. I mean, I guess I'd give it a 7, but that's not a B. A B would be an 8. So screw rating systems. We're not Rotten Tomatoes. We're not going to force
honestly,
our
Tate,
agenda
I'm not
onto
even
you.
thinking about letters like letters at all. Thinking about.
No, you know what? I want to rant really quick. We still have some time on this podcast. Rotten
right.
Tomatoes sucks. They're giving this movie a 90? Are you joking?
Rotten Tomatoes is completely broken and should not have the monopoly that it has over.
Why did Black Panther get a 97? Because you know what? I love what Black Panther did. I don't want to get political, but I love what Black Panther did socially. But it's not a 97. It is not the best Marvel movie ever made.
Going off on a Rotten Tomatoes rant.
Now, you know what? Screw Rotten Tomatoes. I am sick of them having a stranglehold over the freaking thing. Disney pays them. They pay the freaking... Okay, it's just so corrupt. Disney pumps money into Rotten Tomatoes. They pump money into Rotten Tomatoes. So Rotten Tomatoes gives every Disney-produced movie a high score because they just pump money into it.
Rotten Tomatoes has become the Bible.
Right, and you know what's horrible?
Whether or not movies are good is a crime.
Horrible? Rotten Tomatoes pays the production team, not the producer, the production team, based upon how high of a score they get. So if you get like a 93, I don't know what the exact amounts are because I read this online and it might be fake, but I'm pretty sure it's not. But Rotten Tomatoes, like if you get a 93, you get a certain amount. If you get a 95, and then if you get a 97 and plus that, you get a certain amount of money from Rotten Tomatoes. I don't remember what it is. Rotten Tomatoes sucks. Rotten Tomatoes freaking sucks. Look at the audience score. Venom was not a 3 out of 10. I did not like Venom. It was not a 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
Dude. Oh my gosh. Ross has to pee, everybody. I'm exposing him. But anyway.
Yeah. It has been a couple hours. I've been drinking water like this whole time.
Yep. Anyway, guys.
That is it for the Spider-Man Far From Home review. Disjointed and kind of disgruntled conversation.
It's always disjointed, man. I mean, shoot.
That's going to do it.
Yeah.
If you're a Stranger Things fan, I hope you're watching season 3. It is pretty fantastic and better than season 2. I watched pretty much all of it with my sister in one setting. It was kind of nuts. Probably going to build that set pretty soon. Working on Captain America and Iron Man right to gear up for the first Endgame showcase, like you might have seen in the making of Captain America video. Otherwise, I'm still running Tait for the Halo series, and we started playing some Far Cry 4 yesterday, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, Far Cry 4, it's lots of fun with Ross. Let me just say, it's lots of fun playing that game with Ross.
On that note, though,
I want to say I am sculpting Thanos for Ross, so stay tuned for that. It's going to look great.
That is not happening.
That is happening, dude. I got Play-Doh. I'm going to put it in the oven.
Be confused, please. I am
Play-Doh in the oven. I got Play-Doh, dude. I'm making it out of Play-Doh.
If you make a Play-Doh Thanos, though, I will gladly feature it in.
All right, it's going to look so bad.
It's a deal.
All right.
Anyway,
guys, Ross has to be.
Lego Pete, Master Sword, fun. Dude, everybody who's been hanging out with us, especially this far, Jamal, you guys are awesome. Thanks for hanging out with us and talking Spider-Man Far From Home.
Now it's time to go pee.
It's been awesome. Now it's time to go pee, and we'll see you guys next week, next Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, for whatever it is we'll be talking about. So.
Remember, guys, we are inevitable. Thanks so much for coming out.
Take care.